go into the border, you just have a little Constitution book with you. And so when the custom guy wants to take your phone, you give him the Constitution, and it sends a good message. You know, I have a couple questions here from a legal perspective. That's fine. Can you explain the difference? Executive order, congressional law, Supreme Court ruling. I should have paid attention in high school, my bad. And also, this is kind of related, pundits, in quotes, pundits say the president has broad powers with regard to the ban. While legal action has resulted in a stay, can it really help lift the ban? Would activism be a more powerful method? Well, activism is obviously a powerful method in combination with legal action. But to the heart of the matter regarding the difference between executive order, congressional law, and the Supreme Court ruling, that really speaks to the checks and balances that separates our country from the rest of the world. And that's why lawyers take comfort in addressing this crisis right now, because there are tools there. An executive order is basically one branch. There's three branches. You have the judicial, for all these people who didn't go to high school, judicial or slept. You have the executive, the judicial, the judges. The executive is the president, and the legislative is the Congress. These are the three arms of the government, and each one checks on one another. Each one keeps their power in check, and it goes through different ways. So an executive order is the president from the executive branch saying, I am issuing this executive order based on, and he cites a law that was passed by Congress. So the executive is saying, by the power bestowed upon me, I'm executing this order based on the immigration nationalization, which was passed by Congress. So you have two branches now. This executive order now has to be tested by the third arm of the government, which is the judicial branch. And that's where the checks and balances take place. And like I said earlier, 6 out of 6 federal court judges, life appointed, have said in the initial stages, they believe this ban is unconstitutional. So that's the check of the judicial branch to check the power of the executive order, okay? The second one is congressional law. That's when Congress passes a law. They haven't done it here yet, but if Congress passes a law, again, it would have, like the Secret Surveillance or the Patriot Act, that would have to withstand scrutiny in court at some point in time. And the Supreme Court ruling, again, if this is the judicial branch, if the federal judge issues a ruling, it goes up to the Court of Appeals, and it goes up to the Supreme Court. So these are just systems of checks and balances here that are in place to make sure that no one is above the law.
All right, so I've got a lot of questions here, so I'm going to try and consolidate some thematically. So back to the ally kind of question, I've got a couple of questions here about how do we best lend our support, how do allies help without undermining the movement, and then like specifically what would you like allies to do or be ready to do. So if we're talking specifics, obviously this is going to evolve as this movement evolves. But some of the things I would say, first of all, as many of you did, show up to protests, show up to these events to educate yourself. And also in we'll say the riskier types of events like big protests, the more privilege you have, the more you're able to take on risk with smaller consequences. So for an example, for the airport protest, we had a number of people who wanted to come, but were afraid that in the case of their arrest, either they were undocumented or their immigration status was, they were worried about it, or they were single mothers and they couldn't afford to be arrested. So if you can, be that person. Like, stand and defend with your bodies when you can, and obviously that depends on everybody's ability and their context in life, but I think that's an important thing to do. And then finally, I think one of the silver linings, I guess, is almost a little too optimistic, but one of the great things that we've seen since the inauguration is a really powerful outrage that's inspiring people to get involved. So there's a ton of groups cropping up that are trying to help people get involved on both the local and the national level. Obviously, there are already groups that you could plug into, and so I think that getting involved in that way is an easy way to not have to come up with all the solutions on your own. So you can plug into these actions and show up and use your platform to amplify these problems. And as far as without undermining, two of the things I didn't mention is not to monopolize the emotional burdens. So, you know, I've heard this expressed as like hashtag white woman tears. So, you know, if you are not carrying the burden of literally being worried about your own life or that your family's going to be separated, that doesn't mean that your emotions and your response to this isn't valid. It is, but you have to embrace that discrepancy and be aware that the burdens other people are carrying are much heavier. So, a couple other things that I think are really good questions. I'm gonna read this one actually verbatim because I think it's really good. So, if someone has no skin in the game, for example, immigration, green card, refugee status doesn't affect me like police brutality does or clean water in Flint, how do you help them see their need to be an ally? It's a difficult question, partially because, I mean, there is such a thing as, you know, like disaster fatigue. There are a lot of things that suck and a lot of things that we have to care about. But I think for this particular issue, there's two things I would suggest. First of all, if you can, there are a lot of organizations in Michigan that deal with refugee resettlement. For one example, like volunteer with some refugees and humanize the topics. I think that's could be difficult to get somebody to come to if they're a little bit hesitant. The other thing I would suggest actually is the power of art. And by this I mean literature, film, music, to be a kind of cultural bridge. And you could go like straight to the heaviest stuff, like show them turtles can fly or something and just destroy them. But that's the function of a lot of art, is to humanize people that we don't interact with very often. It's a emotional conduit that we approach differently than we approach other things during our day. So I think that could be an inroad for people that really aren't getting it, but you know that deep down in their heart could. Okay, and then, oh man, I got a bunch over here. So also I got, as a teenager, as a young person, how do I express the problems of society in an everyday basis, and how can I educate myself, and kind of looking for things that aren't just posting on social media. So that's awesome. Obviously, can't be too young to get engaged. I know that in high school there are a lot of organizations, I don't know, like Key Club, does that still exist? That you could plug into, you know, that for a long time have been doing really good work trying to engage in the community. And then if you want to be kind of entrepreneurial about it, volunteer. Try to get plugged into some of the groups that are represented here and have fundraisers at your school, or start, you know, a social justice kind of club. There are a lot of ways for you to engage. I know that as a extreme introvert in high school, Key Club was great for me because there was already a structure in place that you could kind of learn about how to engage. So I think it's beautiful that you even want to, so definitely pursue it. And then as far as educating yourself, yeah, so social media isn't the best way to do it, and if you're going to do it that way, I'd suggest Twitter instead of Facebook because of the algorithm differences. But I mean, read the news, the legit news. ProPublica is a nonpartisan journalism organization. I mean, just go straight up Google Scholar. there's a lot of resources, but in order for it to be truly, you know, enlightening and informative and correct, I mean, you got to do a little bit of digging and due diligence to make sure that the sources are credible. Okay, I'm gonna keep it going. Well, okay, hold on. I got one. Sorry, one more.
One more?
So, how can I help without losing my sanity? I'm gonna reiterate food, sleep, and exercise, but also making sure that you're engaging with other people that share your opinion. It'll be you feel a little bit less like you're screaming in an audience that doesn't hear you.
Wonderful. Now.